Behind me is the Give Energy commercial manufacturing facility here at Chemical Lane. And I'm here to find out how, for the past few months, this building has been run entirely off-grid. And I do mean off-grid, not grid neutral, where you're just not touching the grid, you're not asking for any energy. It's actually been off-grid, a disconnect between the outside world and this facility. It's of course down to many solar panels on the roof and a Give Energy commercial battery system. And that's what I'm here to have a look at in more detail. What does it actually need or require to have that level of resilience, of green energy powering this entire commercial facility for months, potentially more? So this is the big battery that does all the magic. So the first thing I want to ask is, I mentioned just then, this is off-grid, it's not grid neutral. So what's the difference to the layman, if you will, to me, and why are we doing it off-grid instead of that?
So most battery systems are grid neutral, which means they monitor the grid supply coming into the building or site, and they will try and achieve 0 kilowatts input, 0 kilowatts export. But importantly, they're still connected to the grid. This system is grid disconnected entirely, off grid. So the grid isn't physically connected to this system in any way, shape or form. That can be very useful if grid's not available, if grid is very expensive, or if you can't get the grid permission for the size of system that you require to run what you need on site.
Right, so this system is in off-grid mode. Is that part of a technical curiosity for us, bit of testing, or is this how you foresee this running from now on?
So it's all about doing what we say we can do. So proving that the system runs in the way it says on the tin, on the data sheet.
And if it's off-grid, it has to.
Exactly. So this system has to provide the electricity that the building requires, and it's topped up by the solar panels on the roof. So up there, we've got approximately 60 kilowatts of PV, and that charges this battery back up. This system is 600 kilowatt hours of storage.
So that's quite small for commercial systems that we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the smallest. We've got the little SME systems,
but
but yes, this is one of the smaller industrial sized batteries that we offer. And that's paired up with a 250 kilowatts battery inverter. And that's to allow us to do things like car charging. If we're testing any other equipment on our site, it gives us that higher power level that we need. We don't tend to use that much on a day-to-day basis, but it's there if we need it.
Now we're in the north of England pretty much, so how long do you suspect those solar panels will power this? I mean, is it a year-round thing or a
good
portion of?
Yeah, it's not a year. So at the minute, we're into about week 5 of running off-grid. There's been 2 instances where, because of the beautiful British summertime that we're not getting at the minute, there's been 2 instances where we've not had enough battery power to run the site entirely. If this was somewhere near the equator, I'm almost certain we could run 365 days a year.
Or a turbine, wind turbine?
Yeah, wind turbine's also an option, yeah. So looking at renewable sources that are outside of the daylight hours, wind is one, hydro is also another possibility.
This building could be plonked in the middle of the desert or the Arctic or somewhere,
exactly.
And it would operate in the same manner, electrically speaking, with the generators, the backup, the solar panels doing their thing, and this ultimately being the core of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, this could go anywhere. There's no real limit on this. This could go even offshore on a remote desert island in theory. You can do anything with this. And the scale, it can go up in the sort of 200 kilowatt sections, 200 kilowatt hour sections, sorry.
Oh, and there comes the fans, so we'll just break off for a second. So you probably saw the fans kicking in there. So if you want more technical details of this, we've already done a video about the commercial systems, what they can do, what the purpose is in a commercial environment is. So I'll put the link to that in the description below. So back to this. As a technical exercise, which I love, pointless technical exercises, more batteries or a wind turbine or more solar would essentially mean all year round.
Yeah,
you could, if you wanted to be completely off grid.
Absolutely. If you understand your load, what your requirements are in terms of power, and it's quite easy to calculate how much generation you can gain from solar and wind. You can do all the calculations. What you'll find you have to do though is oversize the system.
Yes.
So for the summer, you'll generate way more than you need to, and it'll have to be turned down a little bit. And limited. but during the winter, that oversizing allows you to produce the power that you need to keep you going.
If a customer said, I want this system for this building, presumably no, it would be grid neutral rather than off grid.
In most cases,
So,
yeah.
but there's substantial savings in doing it either way, presumably in the battery, obviously.
Yep.
And essentially being able to say you're completely powered by the sun in our case, for at least a portion.
And the thing is, being grid neutral, it makes life a little bit easier. If you've got the grid available, even if the grid's not really capable of what you need, you can supplement the requirements with a battery.
So it's like a slow tap going into a bucket.
Exactly, yeah.
You kind of keep, this is the bucket.
That's it, exactly. That's exactly right. So that grid availability, it just covers the days where the solar generation's really rubbish. So we've had 2 or 3 days recently where it's been really badly overcast and raining, even though it's the middle of summer. Them couple of days, if we'd have had the grid and we'd got the permission to be on the grid, we probably would have only needed a small number of kilowatt hours just to keep us going.
So I have 19 kilowatt hours. I use, obviously it varies depending on what time of year, but let's say I use 13. Could I go off grid at home?
With the all-in-one and the gateway, you can go off-grid with that system. So you can do it a couple of ways. You can physically go and turn your grid off, but that's quite involved. Or you can do it on the app. So you can actually set the app to become off-grid. So you do a toggle switch on the app, it'll switch you off-grid. Your solar stays on, like this system does here. Your solar panels will stay on. So normally, with an on-grid system, if the grid goes off, you lose your solar panels. Okay, so the solar panels, by the way they're designed and the G98 and G99 requirements, the solar panels have to go off when the grid is lost. With the all-in-one and the gateway, the way in which you connect the solar panels to the system, the gateway allows everything to stay on. So long as you've got less than 6 kilowatts of load, you can keep your system running. Now, it's quite important if you are going to have a system for backup or to run off-grid, you need to have a think about your loads. So you don't want to be going to plug your car in, for example. That will quickly deplete the battery into your car. So it's all about being a little bit smart. The system will notify you if the grid fails. At that point, you'd probably try and go and turn some of your big loads off, so you don't need the hairdryer while there's a power cut, for example. And all of our systems can provide some form of grid backup, not necessarily full property or full house, but all of the systems we provide, the AC coupled, the hybrid, the all-in-one and the commercial, can all do some level of backup. The different products allow different levels of that, and it's all about, as you say, sizing the PV correctly and sizing the battery correctly to make sure you've got enough availability.
This being off-grid, it is literally powered by renewable energy. I mean, it's used a lot, I hear, renewable energy powered by the grid's partly renewable, but this is entirely, during the most of the year, renewably powered. It's not connected, so it has to be. So
exactly.
that's effectively what batteries can give you.
This is 100% genuinely renewable. So this isn't a renewable certificate or a claim that it's using renewable energy.
You're not buying credits.
It is renewable energy only.
Give Energy has several buildings dotted around, some similar to this in size, some bigger, some smaller. If you really wanted to, cost aside, we could be completely renewably powered. Which is a lot of people think, well, you're making batteries, they have an impact, there's the power you use when you're doing X, Y and Z. This is proof that batteries actually are the key to balancing things like the grid, to making the most of solar panels. Very much like a large-scale home.
And I think this is where the grid neutral point becomes important. So being off-grid, like I say, it comes with some challenges. You have to make sure the solar and the battery is sized correctly. If your load then changes in the future, that will have an effect. So if you introduce a big piece of machinery that you hadn't thought about, obviously that has a big effect on what size battery and solar you'd need. What we will do, and what we already are doing, is making all of our sites grid neutral. So connected to the grid, with the solar, with the battery, potentially some wind as well, and trying to keep that import and export at zero. What's quite exciting behind that though is the grid services. So the give back scheme that we have, where you get paid for exporting electricity to the grid.
So in summer there's a lot of export, presumably.
So in the summer, even here, we'll generate more than we need to. So this system will shut the solar panels down. So when the batteries hit their level of full, the solar panels have to shut down and stop producing. If you're connected to the grid, what you can then do is sell that energy with an export tariff like you will at your home potentially, but actually there's some schemes where you can actually support the grid, especially during winter. And the give back scheme, there's more information about that on the website.
Essentially, if the grid really says, I need a bit, this can store the energy and then go, here you go. Sounds a bit corny, but is this the future in terms of if you had an industrial estate and each building had its own version of this, the connection to that industrial estate doesn't have to be anywhere near as large?
That's it, yeah. So it can be a much smaller connection. So commercially, when you pay for your electric supply, you pay your rate per kilowatt hour, you pay your standing charge, but you often pay also like an availability fee. So for example, if you have 500 kilowatts of available power from the grid, you pay so much. If you need 1,000 kilowatts of available power from the grid, you pay a lot more.
So you might use that, therefore you have to pay for that whether you do or not.
Whether you do or don't, that's important. So what the battery can allow on an on-grid system then is you have the battery set to discharge above a certain level. So it monitors the import of electricity into the site. When that gets above the defined parameter, we then discharge. And what that means is your grid import never goes above, let's say, 500 kilowatts. So when you pay your availability, you only pay for what you need.
And that's what we mentioned in the last video called peak shaving, I believe.
Correct.
Again, more money saving. So batteries are often seen as a backup, but actually there's probably more of a financial reason to have them than a resilience.
Yeah. And we've seen payback calculations as short as about 3.5 years.
For a commercial system?
For a commercial system, yeah.
Wow. Right, well that's good fun for geeks like myself. And again, I think to be able to say that completely powered by, in our case, the sun, for a portion of the year.
Yep.
That's a statement that's used too often, but in this case, very, very true,
yep.
And getting more and more common. And that's my take home from this video, that I like to see that we're making more use of the panels, the turbines and things like that, and hopefully that will explain a little bit more to people watching in terms of we are off-grid, and we can do this in other buildings as well, which lessens give energy's impact in total.
Yep, absolutely.
Which is the whole point, I guess, of renewable energy.
It is, yeah.
To reduce the impact. You're never going to get rid of it, are you? But you're going to reduce it. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Any questions? I'm sure Darren will no doubt be able to answer them in the comment section via myself. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.